Before the end, there was the jump. I remember the silence on the bridge of the UNS cartographer, a silence that existed in only about 60% of the timelines I was watching. In the other 40, someone was coughing, or dropping a datapad, or screaming as the ship tore itself apart. I've always found it's the quiet timelines that are the most dangerous. They're the ones where the universe is holding its breath. I settled deeper into the navigation chair, the neural crown pressing against my temples. It's the device that translates the storm in my head, my probability perception disorder, as the Earthside doctors called it, into something the ship's systems can understand. To me, the world isn't one solid thing. It's a haze of maybes, a constant shimmer of what-ifs, all happening at once. My brain just does the math. I'm the ship's probability shepherd, which is a military euphemism for the guy who tells the captain which of the infinite ways they're about to die is the least likely. It's a job they give to people like me, gamblers and casino rats who saw the odds a little too clearly and got banned from every table on Earth. Brennan, report. Captain Monica Hayes. Her voice was an anchor in the storm, a single solid data point in a sea of variables. She commanded the cartographer with a philosophy of singular reality, a brute-force denial of any possibility but the one she chose. We were oil and water, but she needed a navigator who could see the icebergs in timelines that hadn't happened yet, and I needed to be as far from a deck of cards as humanity could get me. Probability of successful jump is holding at 93.7%, I said. I didn't mention the 6% chance we'd be inverted into a dimension of pure pain, or the 0.3% chance we'd arrive before we left and witness our own departure. She didn't care about the odds of failure, only success. "Make it 100, she ordered. She stood with her back to me, a silhouette against the starfield on the main view screen. A perfect military bearing. She didn't believe in probability. She believed in orders. "I just read the numbers, Captain," I murmured, my eyes on the data streaming behind my eyelids. I saw our ship not as one vessel but 17, all overlapping images of success and failure. My job was to steer the solid one through. Across the bridge, Dr. Samuel Mitchell, our paradox engineer, adjusted a sock that didn't match its partner. He was the only person I couldn't get a clear read on. My sight relied on cause and effect, on predictable probabilities. Mitchell was a walking, talking glitch in the universal code, a man who existed despite having retroactively prevented his own birth. He winked at me, an action that had a 100% probability of happening, which was in itself a statistical impossibility. We were about to use the wormhole drive, a piece of Mitchell's tech that didn't move us through space so much as adjust the probability of our location from here to there. We were aiming for the edge of the known universe, the boundary where the laws of physics were supposed to get thin. It was the ultimate gamble. "Final confirmation," Hayes' voice cut through. "All hands, secure for transition." The countdown appeared in my vision, a number overlaid on the chaotic streams of light that represented our future. 10. I saw a version of my daughter Sarah as she was in the 43% of timelines where the leukemia took her. She was smiling. 9. I saw the psychiatric facility where they'd found me, trying to explain to a doctor that his next sentence had a 78% chance of being a lie. He didn't appreciate the heads up. 8. The thrum of the drive deepened. The ship's probability state began to destabilize. The 17 ghost ships flickering into 30, then 50. I gripped the arms of the chair. "Hold the primary timeline steady, Brennan," Hayes said. She felt it too, the universe fighting back against the thing we were about to do. 7, 6, 5. My mind was a flood of pure data. I saw us succeed. I saw us fail. I saw us emerge into a space between spaces, a void that was full of a terrible watching presence. The probability of that last one was so small, a fraction of a percent, a rounding error. I discarded it, focusing on the 93.7. 4, 3. I found the optimal path. the one shining thread of cause and effect that led to a stable exit. It felt like surfing, riding a wave of pure potential. 2. Engaging, I said. 1. The universe outside the view screen stopped. For a nanosecond that stretched into an eternity, there was no space, no time or probability. There was only the ship, a single unthinkable idea held in the mind of the void. Then we were through. A perfect calm descended. The ship was silent, the drive's hum gone. The images in my head collapsed into one. We were solid. We were real. My console showed a 100% probability of mission success. It was a number I had never seen before in my life, a perfect hand. I looked up at the view screen. There were no stars. There was no light. There was just a deep, endless black. We had traveled to the edge of the universe. The problem was we'd gone just a little bit too far. The perfect 100% success lasted for about 15 seconds. Long enough for a collective exhale on the bridge, a few tense smiles. Long enough for someone to say, "We did it." Then the questions began, quiet at first, then insistent, rippling out from the sensor stations. Confirming position. There's nothing to confirm. Long-range scanners show uniform emptiness, no cosmic background radiation. Captain Hayes stood unmoving, studying the absolute black on the view screen. She absorbed the reports without a flicker of expression. In the 61% of timelines where she was about to show fear, her knuckles would be white. In this one, they were relaxed. She was performing certainty. "Maintain position," she said, her voice cutting through the rising murmur. "Run a full diagnostic. I want to know where and when we are." I unstrapped myself from the navigation chair. The neural crown had left a band of cold on my forehead. My internal probabilities were settling, the storm of the jump receding into its usual background haze of overlapping futures. I felt drained, the way a gambler feels after a 17-hour game, win or lose. I walked over to the comm station, where Officer Davies was running a diagnostic on the quantum array, the system that let us talk to Earth instantly across any distance. He shook his head, looking at his screen. "Nothing. It's like trying to call a house that was never built." He caught my eye and grinned, a flash of relief. He was young, barely out of the academy, and this was his first deep space assignment. "Hell of a ride, huh, Brennan? You threaded the needle." He slapped his own shoulder, tapping the mission patch sewn there. "For the star." A single 5-pointed star, stark white against the navy blue of his uniform. And behind it was the ghost of a planet, a small blue marble laced with clouds. I could see both at once, two realities layered over each other, but the planet was fading, losing its solidity, becoming transparent. The star was winning. "They got it wrong," I said. "On the final patch." Davies frowned, his grin vanishing. "What are you talking about?" "The emblem," I insisted, pointing. The final design was a planet, a single blue planet representing Earth, not a star. I sat in the design review. I remember the vote. My own memory felt like a solid object in my mind, a perfect, clear recollection. But I was watching the evidence of it evaporate right in front of me. Davies looked down at his own shoulder as if seeing it for the first time. He ran a finger over the crisp embroidery of the star. "Brennan, it's always been a star. It stands for humanity's reach. Everyone knows that." He gave me a look, the one I always got. The look that said, "Oh, you're that Brennan, the probability theorist, the guy who isn't all there. Maybe in one of your other timelines, huh? In this one, it's a star." "No," I said. This was different from my usual perception. I didn't see two possible emblems. I saw one emblem literally overwriting another, erasing a fact. "It was a planet, I'm telling you." My voice was a little too loud. A few heads turned. The officer at the next station over looked at his own patch, then at me, and shook his head with a pitying smile. The universe was ganging up on me. That's when Captain Hayes turned, her eyes fixing on me from across the bridge. The low-level chatter died instantly. She moved, crossing the deck in a few strides until she stood before me. Her entire focus was a weapon aimed at my head. "Report, Mr. Brennan." "The mission emblem, Captain. It's been altered. It was a planet. I remember it being a planet." She looked at the emblem on my own uniform, then at the one on hers. The UNS Cartographer mission emblem is a single 5-pointed star representing humanity's reach. It has been since its ratification on June 11th, 2301. That is the singular objective reality. She paused, letting the silence press in. "I need my navigator focused on the probabilities ahead of us, not the fantasies inside your head. You are here to observe alternate futures, not invent alternate pasts. Indulging in quantum indecision is a dereliction of duty." Her eyes narrowed. "We are on the edge of history. Do not make me question your fitness to witness it. Am I clear?" Every possible response I could make led to the brig or the medical bay. The probability of winning this argument was 0. The math was simple. I had to fold. "Yes, Captain." She gave a curt nod. To Davies, she said, "Back to your station." Then to the bridge at large. "I want that diagnostic finished 5 minutes ago." As she turned away, she spoke to me one last time. Her voice a murmur meant only for me. "I'm having a note added to your file. Navigator Brennan experiencing minor temporal disorientation post-jump. Monitor for psychosis." She walked away. The threat was clear. My own mind, the very tool that made me essential, was being recategorized as a liability. A bug. I looked down at the star on my sleeve. The blue planet behind it was gone now. Completely. There was only the star. It had always been the star. But I remembered. I remembered the planet as surely as I remembered my own name. The jump had been a success. A perfect 100% success. But we had brought something back with us. Or we'd arrived somewhere it had been waiting. And it had already started rewriting the world, one tiny, forgotten truth at a time. Every head I passed followed me, every whispered conversation a new probability stream, calculating my odds of being sedated by morning. In 40% of them, I was. My sanctuary was 2 decks down, nestled at the exact gravitational center of the ship, the probability core. It was the only place on the cartographer where seeing 17 versions of reality at once was a job requirement, not a symptom. The door slid open into a sphere of darkness, the walls alive with cascading ribbons of light, the raw data of the multiverse translated into something a human mind could just barely withstand. It was chaos, but it was my chaos. It felt like home. I settled into the navigator's chair, the worn material conforming to my back. I lowered the neural crown. The scent of cooling gel filled my nostrils as the 7 processor nodes, the points of contact between my brain and the ship, pressed against my skull. There was a prickle as the interface synced, and the universe opened up. The walls of the core vanished, replaced by an infinite branching web of light. Every thread was a possible future, every junction a choice. My mind, which felt so loud and crowded on the bridge, suddenly felt small and quiet in the face of this. My task was simple. Find the brightest, most stable thread and tell the ship how to follow it. As part of Hayes's diagnostic order, I needed to recalibrate our short-range sensors against a known constant, a celestial baseline. I brought up the targeting system, my thoughts directing the ship's external eyes. The command felt like a simple act of will. I focused on the coordinates for Proxima Centauri. It was supposed to be the easiest job on the ship. Proxima was the lamppost on the corner of our cosmic street. Boring, red, predictable. It had been there for 4 billion years. The probability of it not being there in the next 10 seconds was functionally 0. The coordinates locked. A data window materialized in my vision. A clean, single reality overlay on the storm of maybes. It showed a feed of a small, dim red star. Solid, stable. I initiated the calibration sequence, letting the ship's systems sync with the star's light signature. Everything was normal. I could feel the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. Maybe the emblem thing was just a fluke, a side effect of the jump. And then it happened. One moment, Proxima Centauri was there, a familiar point of light. The next, it wasn't. The space it occupied was now indistinguishable from the perfect, starless black all around it. The data window didn't show an error. It just showed emptiness. A clean, absolute void where a star had just been. For 3.14 seconds, my mind refused to process it. An event with a 0% probability had just occurred. It was like rolling a 7 on a 6-sided die. This was an event in the primary solid reality that everyone shared. My first thought was mechanical failure. It's the crown, a glitch in my interface. I ran a self-diagnostic on my own rig. All systems green. The sensor array, then, must be. I rerouted the feed through a secondary system. The result was the same. Nothing. Then, just as cleanly as it had vanished, Proxima Centauri reappeared. It was just there again. The same dim red star, radiating heat and light as if it hadn't just taken a 3-second vacation from existence. I had to make a choice. The probability that reporting this would get me thrown in the medbay was now hovering around 70%. The probability that ignoring a fundamental law of physics being broken was a catastrophic mistake was unknowable, and the unknowable variables are the ones that kill you. I took a breath and opened a comms channel to the bridge. Alert, navigation. Primary reference point Proxima Centauri is experiencing intermittent existence. The star just went offline for 3 seconds. The silence on the other end lasted for what felt like a week. I could see the probability streams branching from my statement. In most of them I could hear laughter. Finally, a voice. Hayes's tactical officer. Navigation bridge. Our long-range sensors are stable. We show no anomalies with Proxima Centauri. Stand by. I waited, watching the feed in my vision. The star remained, mocking me with its placid light. Another voice, a sensor tech from another department. Astrometrics confirms navigation. Proxima is nominal. All historical and real-time data is stable. Then came the voice I was dreading. Captain Hayes. Her tone wasn't broadcast to the whole bridge this time. It was a private channel, piped directly into my ear, as cold and empty as the space outside. Brennan. I closed my eyes. Captain, I saw it. It wasn't a probability reading. It was a primary observation. What you saw, Mr. Brennan, was a data flicker inside your crown, a post-jump anomaly inside your own head. Every other system on this ship and every other officer confirms that you are mistaken. You are reporting hallucinations as facts. That is not a technical problem. That is a medical one. A new probability stream flared into existence, brighter than the others. It showed me being escorted from the core by 2 security officers. Captain, I swear to you, this is your final warning. She cut me off. You will complete your diagnostic using the stable data the rest of us are observing. You will cease these reports immediately. If I hear one more word about flickering stars or changing emblems, you will be permanently removed from duty and confined to the medical bay for the remainder of this mission. I will not have my navigator compromise this command with his fantasies. The channel clicked shut. I was alone, floating in a sphere of infinite futures, and the one that felt most certain was the one where I was in a straitjacket. I was going to follow her order. I was going to run the diagnostic, and I was going to find the proof that would either save us or get me locked away forever. Short range was compromised. The lampposts were flickering. So I went long. I bypassed the local star systems and aimed our quantum sensors at something undeniable, a landmark of our corner of the universe, the Fornax cluster. My mind reached out through the ship's systems, sifting through the probability streams that flowed from that distant patch. The process was less like seeing and more like assembling a memory. The sensors gathered quintillions of quantum data points, and the crown helped my mind collapse them into a single, coherent image. A picture of now built from the echoes of 50,000 galaxies. The image resolved in my vision, and it was wrong. It was there. The cluster. A glowing smear against the absolute black, just as it should be. But the light was thin, brittle. It looked like an old photograph left out in the sun. The colors faded, the details bleached away. The energy signature was chaotic, fluctuating wildly, as if the entire cluster was caught in a state of quantum indecision. It was there, and it was simultaneously in the process of not being there. This was the same sickness I'd seen with the star, with the emblem. But this was on the scale of a cosmic empire. I couldn't show this to Hayes. She would call it another hallucination, a bigger one. I needed a different kind of witness. Someone whose job it was to look at the glitches in the human machine and work with contradictory data. I keyed in the comms channel for the medical bay. "Dr. Peterson." Her voice came back calm, with an undercurrent of weariness. "Brennan, is something wrong?" I could tell from her tone she was already filling out the paperwork for my psychiatric evaluation. A 67% probability. "I need you in the probability core. I have a long-range observation I can't explain. The energy readings from the Fornax cluster are paradoxical." There was a pause. I imagined her weighing the odds. A 72% chance she dismisses it as a symptom. But there was a 28% chance her scientific curiosity wins. Gamblers have lost everything on worse odds. "Paradoxical is Dr. Mitchell's department, not mine," she said. "This isn't about physics, Lisa," I said, the use of her first name a calculated risk. A plea for a connection beyond rank and file. "It's about information. The data says one thing, and the observation says another. It feels like a memory is being corrupted. That's your field." Another pause, longer this time. "On my way," she finally said. Relief hit me so hard I felt lightheaded. I had a witness. I wasn't alone with this anymore. I wanted to have the data routed to her lab. I turned in my chair to access the physical routing console on the wall behind me. A simple maneuver, my back to the infinite void in my mind's eye. I keyed in the commands, established the link, and cross-referenced the signal. It took maybe 10 seconds, 15, tops. When I turned back, the screen was blank. Not blank as in no signal, blank as in empty. The fading smear of the Fornax cluster was gone. In its place was the same uniform, featureless black as everywhere else. The energy readings were flatline. 0. "No," I whispered. I reran the observation. Nothing. I checked the sensor logs. The last 15 minutes of data, my entire observation of the fading cluster, were gone, replaced with a seamless record of observing an empty quadrant. I pulled up the ship's primary astrometric database, the official map. I searched for Fornax cluster. The result came back in a green font. No entry found. I plunged deeper into the historical archives, the star charts we'd brought from Earth, the foundational data of our entire mission. I searched for galaxies I knew by heart: NGC 1316, NGC 1365, Fornax A. No entry found. 50,000 galaxies, trillions of stars, countless worlds, erased from history. It was as if they had never existed at all. The door to the core slid open, and Dr. Peterson stepped inside, her silver hair catching the glow of the data streams. She carried a medical data pad. "Okay, Brennan," she said, her voice gentle, the way you speak to a spooked animal. "Show me this paradoxical data." I couldn't speak. I could only lift a shaking hand and point to the main display. A perfect, empty square of space. She stepped closer, peering at the console. She ran her own diagnostic. She cross-referenced the feed with the ship's official charts. She checked the archives. After a long silence, she turned to me. Her eyes were full of pity that was 1,000 times worse than Hayes's anger. "Thomas, there's nothing there. The logs show this sector has always been a void. There has never been a galaxy cluster at these coordinates." I stared at her, the truth a scream trapped in my throat. She was right. The ship, the logs, the universe itself, they all agreed with her. There was only one thing in all of creation that contradicted it: my own memory. "Thomas," Peterson said again, her voice pulling me back from the edge. "Talk to me. What did you see?" My first instinct was to rage, to scream that she was blind, that the whole universe was blind. But I saw the probabilities branching out from that choice. Security would come. A needle would go into my arm. My fight would be over before it began. So I pushed the anger down, deep down, and focused on the only thing I had left. The fossil, the memory. It was there, Lisa. It was there. I was watching it. It was dimming, flickering like Proxima Centauri did, but on a massive scale. I called you because the energy readings were chaotic. I turned away for 10 seconds to route the feed to you. When I turned back, it was gone. She watched me, her green eyes unblinking. Her datapad was active in her hand. I knew she was monitoring my vitals. Heart rate, blood pressure, pupil dilation. I was a data point to her, a walking anomaly. "And the ship's records?" she prompted. "Gone!" I choked out. "Rewritten. The database claims this sector has always been empty. But my memory is perfect, clearer than this room." NGC 1316, a lenticular galaxy near the core. It had these incredible dust lanes that looked like a scar across its face. I remember the gravitational lensing effect, the way the light from the galaxies behind it was bent. I remember the star formation rates I was reading just minutes ago. I looked her dead in the eye, trying to pour every ounce of certainty I possessed. Hallucinations are messy, they distort, they fade. This memory isn't fading, it's stable, it's a rock, and the entire universe is telling me it's water. I took a step closer. The mission emblem, Proxima Centauri. And now this. This isn't me breaking down, Lisa. This is a pattern. Something is following us, or we brought it with us. And it's not destroying things, it's editing them out. It's erasing elements from the pattern and then restructuring it so there are no holes, no signs of the change. Except for me. For some reason, I'm not being restructured. I'm the anomaly in the system. I remember. Peterson was silent for a long time. She looked from my face to the empty void on the screen, then back again. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a probability I hadn't calculated. It wasn't belief, it was something far more valuable. It was professional curiosity. She, the memory surgeon, the expert on how the mind records, corrupts and loses information, was faced with a subject claiming to have a perfect, high-fidelity memory of an event that was physically impossible and historically non-existent. My delusion, if that's what it was, wasn't following the known models for psychosis or temporal disorientation. It was too coherent, too precise. She tapped a few commands into her datapad. "You're right about one thing. It's a pattern, and patterns can be studied." She looked at the empty display again. "You say your observation, your conscious focus, is the trigger. It feels like it. With Proxima, it vanished when I was looking. With Fornax, it vanished when I looked away. Maybe it's not looking. Maybe it's just knowing, thinking about it. A retrocausal informational hazard," she murmured. "A concept that erases its own subject." She went still, her mind clearly working at a speed I could only guess at. Then she turned to me, her decision made. The pity was gone from her eyes. "We need a controlled experiment. We need a target that is unambiguous, stable, and easily observable by a third party. We need to isolate the variable. The variable in this case is you. But I can't be the only observer. If this is real, I need a witness whose authority even the captain can't dismiss. We're going to run a test. We're going to pick a star, and you're going to focus on it. And I'm going to have a full bridge crew watching when you do it." The walk to the bridge felt like the longest gamble of my life. Every crew member we passed in the corridor would glance at Peterson, then at me. The odds of this ending with me in a quiet, padded room were hovering at a clean 83%. 17% odds of being right was a long shot, even for me. I'd taken bets with worse chances, but never with stakes this high. The bridge doors opened. Captain Hayes was at her command station, a rigid pillar of authority in the center of the orderly room. When she saw us, her jaw tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. It was the only sign of her displeasure. "Dr. Peterson, I expected a report on the navigator's condition, not a house call." Peterson met her eyes without flinching. "I am here to conduct a final diagnostic, Captain, one that requires your observation." "My observation? You want to turn my bridge into a theater for one-man psychosis? We are in an uncharted, potentially hostile region of space. I have neither the time nor the inclination for this." "With respect, Captain, that is precisely why we must do this. Navigator Brennan is either experiencing a severe, mission-compromising delusion, or he is the only person on this ship perceiving a new and inexplicable physical law. Either possibility represents a direct threat to this crew. We cannot proceed until we know which it is." Hayes's eyes narrowed, shifting from Peterson to me. I felt like a bug under a microscope. "And how do you propose to test this new physical law?" "A controlled, observable experiment. We select a known, stable celestial body. All bridge sensors will be locked onto it. The entire command crew will act as witnesses. Navigator Brennan will then focus his attention on the target. We will observe the results." A low murmur spread across the bridge. Officers exchanged uneasy looks. The idea was insane. A man was going to try and think a star out of existence. Hayes was silent for a full 10 seconds. I saw the probabilities warring in her mind. Her military training screamed at her to shut this down, to reassert control. But Peterson had framed it perfectly, not as a challenge to her reality, but as a threat assessment. To a commander like Hayes, an unknown variable was a thing to be identified, catalogued, and neutralized. "Fine," she said finally. The murmuring stopped instantly. "You will have your experiment. But be advised, Doctor. When this is over and nothing has happened, I will hold you equally accountable for this disruption." She turned to her tactical officer. "Target the main view screen. Pick something bright, something no one can miss." The officer, a man named Corwin, hesitated. "Sir?" "You heard me, Lieutenant," Hayes snapped. "Give us a star." A moment later, the vast blackness of the main screen was replaced by a single, blazing point of light. It was a giant, an angry, orange-red behemoth. "Betelgeuse," Corwin announced. "Orion constellation. Red supergiant, one of the brightest in the sky. All sensors confirm stable output, nominal position." "Perfect," Hayes said. She turned to me. Her eyes were chips of ice. "There is your target, Mr. Brennan. Do your thing." Every eye on the bridge was on me. I was the main attraction in a circus of madness. This was the ultimate bet. All in. I faced the screen, faced the raw nuclear fury of a star. "Focus," Peterson said quietly from beside me. I closed my eyes. I didn't need to see it. Seeing wasn't the point. I needed to know it. I reached out with my mind, not with some mystical energy, but with the pure fact of memory. I pulled up everything I knew about Betelgeuse. I saw it as an object, a sphere of incandescent gas 400 million miles wide. I remembered its mass, its spectral type, its position in the Orion arm. I remembered diagrams of its fusion cycles from my academy textbooks. I remembered a girl I once knew who had a tattoo of the constellation on her shoulder. I gathered all of it, the data, the physics, the memories, and I aimed it. I held the concept of Betelgeuse in my mind, held it with a perfect, diamond-hard certainty. I was observing its existence with such an intense and total focus that the universe would have no choice but to notice what I was doing. Through my closed eyelids, the ambient orange glow in the room vanished. A collective gasp swept the bridge. a sharp, shocked intake of breath from a dozen different throats at once. My eyes snapped open. The screen was black. It was the same perfect void that was everywhere else. Beetlejuice was gone. Corwin's voice, a strangled whisper. "Sir, confirm. All feeds are blank. Astrometrics confirms. Beetlejuice is gone." I looked at Captain Hayes. She was gripping the railing in front of her. Her knuckles were bone white. The armor of her certainty had been shattered. Beside me, Peterson was already moving. She stepped up to a young ensign at a nearby station, a woman who was staring at the blank screen with wide, terrified eyes. "Ensign, tell me about the star Beetlejuice." The ensign looked at her, confused. "The star? What?" "Beetlejuice," Peterson repeated patiently. "What do you know about it?" The ensign blinked. I don't know that name. I've never heard of it." Without another word, Peterson placed a small silver device against the ensign's temple. The woman flinched, but Peterson held her steady. A hum filled the air for a second. Peterson removed the device and turned to face Captain Hayes. "Her name is Ensign Miller," Peterson announced to the bridge, "and I have just extracted her freshest memory, a perfect, high-resolution recording of a giant red star disappearing from the main view screen." Peterson projected the memory from her datapad onto a secondary screen. It played out in silence. The image of Beetlejuice, blazing and immense, then the sudden, shocking transition to absolute nothing. It was exactly what we had all just seen with our own eyes. But the ensign standing beside her, the owner of that memory, just stared at the screen with the blank, uncomprehending look of someone watching a film in a language they don't speak. She remembered the event, but not the context. She remembered the movie, but not the character who died. The memory was a perfect fossil of a creature that had been erased from the book of life. The silence on the bridge stretched. I saw faces drained of blood, hands clamped over mouths. Captain Hayes straightened up, releasing her grip on the railing. She turned away from the blank view screen as if dismissing it, her eyes sweeping over her crew, assessing the damage. Her face was carved from stone, but I could see the probability streams around her flickering violently. In 89% of them, she was screaming inside. "Seal the bridge," she said. "No one enters or leaves. No transmissions, internal or external. What happened in this room is now classified above top secret." The tactical officer Corwin looked at her. "Captain, classified as what?" "As a hostile attack," Hayes bit out, "by an unknown weapon of unknown origin." She had found her footing. She had taken the incomprehensible cosmic horror and filed it under a heading she understood: combat. All eyes turned to Peterson and me. We were the experts on the nature of this new enemy. "Doctor," Hayes said, her voice regaining its steel, "explain what you believe just happened. No theories, just the evidence." "The evidence suggests we are dealing with what can only be described as a retrocausal informational hazard. In simple terms, a weapon that doesn't destroy a target, but erases its entire history." She gestured to the blank-faced Ensign Miller. "The weapon seems to propagate through conscious observation. Once a target is infected by being observed, its entire causal history is retracted from the timeline. The universe, which appears to be a self-correcting system, then seamlessly rewrites itself to accommodate the absence. The target is gone, and so is all evidence it ever existed. Except," she paused, looking directly at me, "for us." A new wave of murmurs rippled through the crew. Why us? Why were we the only ones who remembered? This time, it wasn't Peterson who answered. It was Dr. Mitchell, the paradox engineer, who had been quietly observing from the back of the bridge. "The drive. It has to be the wormhole drive." He walked forward, his eyes alight with intellectual excitement. "It doesn't just bend space, it tunnels through probability. To do that, it has to create a stable reality bubble around the ship, a zone where our own causal timeline is protected from outside interference. It's a causal isolation field, an unintended side effect. He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Our drive walled us off. We're a little bubble of what was, floating in a sea of what never happened. Hayes processed this, her mind piecing together the horrifying new architecture of our reality. And this weapon? This hazard? Does it have a source? Is it an entity? Peterson shook her head. We can't know. We have no data on anything outside this bubble. The effect appears predatory, but that could be anthropomorphism. It may not be an entity that feeds on matter or energy. It seems to feed on information, on meaning itself. She hesitated, as if searching for a term that could contain the horror without surrendering to it. They don't add anything to the void. They simply retract what already is. I'm calling them the retractors. Hayes locked her eyes on mine. The last trace of doubt was gone. Mr. Brennan, it seems your condition is our only early warning system. It also makes you the most dangerous man on this ship. She turned to address the entire bridge. Listen to me, all of you. As of this moment, our mission is no longer exploration. Our mission is survival. The history of the human race, the memory of Earth, of every star we ever charted, now exists only within the hull of this vessel. We are no longer a ship. We are a library. We are an ark. And the flood is rising. Corwin, execute Protocol Gamma 7. All external observation ports, including this view screen, are to be sealed by blast shields. Effective immediately. Captain, Corwin stammered, that will leave us completely blind. We are already blind, Hayes shot back. Looking outside is a death sentence. Our eyes are a liability. She turned to her communications officer. Purge the active sensor logs, all of them. Then I want you to go into the primary database. Isolate all astrometric data, star charts, galactic maps, survey records, everything beyond the Sol system. Isolate it and then scrub it from the active memory of this ship. The officer stared at her, horrified. Sir, if we purge the star charts, how will we ever get home? Home is now a concept, Lieutenant. One that we are solely responsible for preserving. Any data point that can be observed can be targeted. We can't risk one of you having a stray thought about Alpha Centauri and wiping out our nearest neighbor. From now on, the only map that matters is the one inside Mr. Brennan's head. Every head on the bridge turned to me. I felt like I had been physically struck. I was no longer the ship's navigator. I was its sole, living, terrifyingly fragile star chart. This applies to everyone, Hayes continued. All personnel are confined to quarters until further notice. When moving through the ship for essential duties, you will wear a sensory deprivation mask, total blackout. You will be guided by audio cues and internal sensors only. I want sight reduced to an absolute minimum. A young tech near the engineering console let out a small, choked sound. The probability of a complete breakdown in ship morale was climbing past 50%. Hayes heard it. She zeroed in on him. You think this is extreme, son? The alternative is accidentally thinking about your mother on her front porch and erasing the entire planet she's standing on. Paranoia is now a survival trait. Fear is the appropriate response. Now get it under control. She swept her gaze across the rest of the bridge. Strict communication silence on all personal matters related to home. You do not talk about your families. You do not talk about your cities. You do not reminisce about your favorite beach or the color of the sky. You will empty your minds. We are ghosts. We carry a history that, for our own safety, we must try to forget. Her orders were a cascade of impossibilities, a manual for a new kind of existence where thought itself was the enemy. We were being ordered to perform psychological surgery on ourselves, to cut out the parts of us that were human, the parts that remembered and loved and longed for home. Finally, she turned to me. 2 security officers detached themselves from the wall and took up positions on either side of me before she even spoke. Brennan, she said, you will be confined to the probability core. It is the most shielded part of the ship. You are not to leave it without my direct authorization. Dr. Peterson will be your sole point of contact. Your food will be brought to you. Your only job is to watch. Watch the probabilities. You are our eyes now, the only pair we can risk using." With a deep, grinding groan, the massive titanium blast shields began to descend over the main view screen. The last image of the starless void was slowly eclipsed by a wall of grey metal. One by one, the sections slammed shut. We were cut off, sealed in, a ship full of memories, adrift in a universe that was forgetting itself, with the greatest threat of all locked inside with us. For 3 days, the cartographer drifted in silence and darkness. Hayes's protocols were absolute. We lived like phantoms in a haunted house, gliding through corridors guided only by the synthesized voice of the ship's computer announcing junctions and deck numbers. We wore the blackout masks, thick rubber and plastic. You learned to recognize people by the sound of their breathing, the rhythm of their mag boots on the deck plates. My world shrank to the sphere of the probability core. I was its prisoner and its king. Peterson was the only person I saw. We didn't talk much. The probabilities did the talking for us. I spent my time monitoring what I'd started calling the ship's causal integrity. It was a number I'd pulled from the background noise of the probability drive, a percentage that measured how anchored we were to a single, stable timeline. When we first jumped, it was 99.9%. After Betelgeuse vanished, it dropped to 94%. In the last 3 days of lockdown, it had begun to bleed away, point by point. We were slowly dissolving. On the 4th day, a Priority 1 alert came from Peterson. "Thomas, I need you in the Paradox workshop." "What is it?" I asked. The causal integrity number on my screen flickered and dropped another full point, 90.4%. "It's Mitchell," she said, and the line went dead. I ripped the neural crown off my head and ran. The corridors were dark, the automated voice calling out my position as I sprinted past. "Deck 7, Section Gamma. Deck 7, Section Delta." I fumbled with my mask, tearing it from my face. I'd take the risk. I needed to see. The door to the workshop was open. Peterson was standing just inside, her back to me, her medical datapad held in a white-knuckled grip. Mitchell's workshop was always a glorious, chaotic mess of devices and half-finished paradoxes. Now it was clean, tidy. Every tool was in its place, every surface polished. It was the tidiness of a room that was no longer in use. Mitchell was there. He was sitting on a stool at his primary workbench, his back to us. He was holding a single quantum spanner, polishing its smooth chrome surface with a clean rag, back and forth, a simple, repetitive, meaningless motion. "Sam," Peterson said. He didn't turn. His hands continued their rhythmic work. I stepped around the workbench to face him. His mismatched eyes, one blue, one green, were open and clear. They just weren't focused on anything. They were looking at the spanner, but they weren't seeing it. There was no spark of genius, no manic energy, nothing. The lights were on, but the house was empty. "Mitchell, it's Thomas." He stopped polishing. He slowly raised his head and looked at me. There was no recognition, just a blank, placid waiting. It was like looking at a synthetic. "What is your name?" I asked. His response was immediate, his voice a toneless monosyllable. "I do not have that information." Peterson held her datapad up, showing me the screen. It was a real-time neural scan of his brain. The lower functions, motor control, autonomic systems, were a steady green. But the parts of the brain that housed memory, personality, higher reasoning, they were black. A perfect, silent void. "It's not amnesia," she whispered. "Amnesia is a locked room. This is an empty lot. Everything that made him Samuel Mitchell, his knowledge, his personality, his memories of a childhood that never happened, it's all gone, wiped clean. But how? The lockdown was perfect. The shields are up. He hasn't seen anything." "It wasn't external," Peterson said, her eyes on Mitchell's blank face. "This breach wasn't through the eyes. It was through the mind." She took a shaky breath. Mitchell was the smartest man on the ship, the only one who could truly comprehend a paradox. What do you think he's been doing for the last 3 days, locked in here alone? He was thinking. He was thinking about the problem, she confirmed. He was turning his own existence over and over in his mind, analyzing his paradoxical nature, trying to weaponize it. He was thinking about himself, and that's how they got in. Self-reflection. The simple human act of being aware of your own consciousness. That was the open door. I looked at Mitchell, who had returned to his polishing, back and forth. The most brilliant mind of our generation, a man who existed outside the rules of reality, had been unwritten by a thought. The sensory lockdown was a joke. The blast shields were useless theatre. We had sealed ourselves in a tomb, but the grave robbers were already inside. They were inside our skulls, waiting for us to think, to remember, to simply be ourselves. The walk back from Mitchell's workshop was a walk through a dying mind. The ship itself was coming apart at the seams. A corridor would flicker, and for a half-second I would see it, as it was an hour ago, littered with the discarded ration packs from a shift change that had already happened. The deck plates beneath my feet were solid. Then for a step they felt like nothing at all, a void I had to force myself to trust. We were in a feedback loop. Our own awareness was the weapon, and now that we were all acutely aware, the effect was accelerating. The causal integrity was in freefall, 78%. When we reached the bridge, Captain Hayes stood at the center of the chaos, issuing orders that no longer connected with reality. "Report!" She was yelling at a terrified engineering tech. "The breach is in section beta, sir. The bulkhead won't seal," the tech reported. "It's not a hole, it's a disagreement. The ship thinks the corridor is there and not there at the same time." On a secondary screen, I saw the camera feed from the corridor. It was a nightmare of visual static, a colorless wound in the air. The edges of the corridor frayed, bits of metal and conduit flaking off into the non-space, ceasing to be. It was pulling the ship apart, one contradictory idea at a time. "We can't fix it," Peterson said. "You can't weld a paradox shut." She turned to Hayes. "Captain, our conventional solutions are useless. There's only one person who built systems to operate in this kind of environment." Hayes's eyes shot to Mitchell, who we had guided to a vacant console. He was staring at his own hands, fascinated, as if discovering them for the first time. "He's a child," Hayes spat. "But his tools are still here," Peterson insisted. She was already at Mitchell's side, her medical kit open. She pulled out a modified neural interface, a smaller, more aggressive-looking version of my own crown. "His paradox engines, his drive, they're still viable. We just need the key." She looked at Hayes, her eyes pleading. "Let me try something." Hayes stared at the spreading wound on the view screen, then at the shell of the man who was once her only hope. The probability of our hull collapsing in the next 10 minutes climbed to 60%. She gave a single, sharp nod. Peterson didn't waste a second. She placed the neural interface on Mitchell's head. "I can't restore his memory," she explained, "but I might be able to create a bootstrap loop. Use the unique paradoxical signature of his own existence as a key to reboot his procedural knowledge. His skills, not his soul." She activated the device. Mitchell's body went rigid, his back arching, his mismatched eyes rolled back in his head. For a moment I saw a dozen ghost versions of him flicker around the chair, echoes of timelines where this procedure killed him, or worse. Then he went still. He lowered his head and looked at Peterson. "Query," he said. "State desired outcome." It worked. Or a part of it did. Peterson let out a breath she'd been holding for a lifetime. "The ship is experiencing a causal integrity failure," she said, speaking to him as if he were a computer. "We need to stabilize our reality bubble." Mitchell's blank eyes turned to the main console. He stood, walked to the command station, and pushed the tactical officer aside. His hands moved over the controls. He wasn't thinking. He was just doing. "Accessing Paradox Drive," he stated. "Warning. Engaging the drive will resolve the immediate breach by creating a terminal causal loop. Temporal stability will be achieved at the cost of forward momentum. We will be safe. We will also be trapped." "Do it," Hayes commanded. The universe outside the breach folded. I saw the bridge from a dozen different angles at once, as if space itself had shattered into a hall of mirrors. Time stuttered, rewound, and played again. I saw Peterson place the crown on Mitchell's head after he had already reached the console. With a gut-wrenching lurch that felt like falling in every direction at once, it stopped. The breach on the screen was gone. The causal integrity reading on my internal display locked at a perfect, solid 100%. Everything was still. "Status," Hayes breathed. "The Paradox Drive is engaged," Mitchell reported without turning around. "Local timeline is now a closed loop. We are stable. We are isolated. We are no longer moving through space-time. We are here. Safe and trapped. We were now a ship in a bottle, and the bottle was adrift in an ocean of nothing." Hayes stared at the stable, unchanging readouts. She had secured her ship, but she had lost the war. Her philosophy of singular, forward-moving reality was in ruins, propped up by a machine that ran on the very paradoxes she despised. She turned. Her eyes found mine across the bridge. The iron mask was gone. In its place was a haunted exhaustion. She walked towards me, the security officers parting to let her pass. She stopped in front of the Probability Core's sealed door, the place where my truths were born. "You were right, Brennan," she whispered. Her shadow on the wall behind her twitched, moving a fraction of a second before she did. "There's more than one timeline." She looked down at her hands, which were starting to lose their solidity, becoming translucent. "On the Leviathan, my submarine, the quantum drive failed. We were experiencing this, a cascade. I saw a timeline where my husband, Samuel, where he lived. And I saw the one where he died, but the rest of the crew survived." Her voice hitched. "I chose. I collapsed the probability. I made one reality the only reality. I told everyone there was no choice, that what happened was the only thing that could have happened." She looked up at me, and her eyes were mirrors of 1,000 other timelines, all filled with pain. "I wasn't just a commander. I was a liar. I've spent the last 8 years holding the line against a truth I've always known." As she spoke, her form began to flicker more violently, her voice echoing before the words left her mouth. She was becoming a paradox herself, a woman who existed and didn't, a commander who had given an order she couldn't follow. She was being unwritten by her own contradiction. "Captain," I started, but I didn't know what to say. Her flickering hand reached out. "The only timeline that matters," she gasped, her form becoming more void than woman, "is the one you can live with." And then she was gone. One moment, a captain confessing her soul. The next, a shimmering column of visual static in the shape of a woman, a hole in the air. The captain of the UNS cartographer was gone, and one of them was standing in her place. The thing that wore Captain Hayes' uniform stood there, a shimmering wound in the shape of a woman, radiating a silence that was louder than any scream. The air around it warped, colors bleeding away into grayscale. The 2 security officers reacted on pure instinct. They raised their plasma rifles. 2 lances of brilliant blue energy shot from their weapons and hit the Hayes thing dead center. They didn't splash or sizzle. They simply vanished into the static, swallowed without a trace. The thing didn't even shudder. It was like trying to shoot a hole in a shadow. Then it spoke. The voice was 100 versions of Monica Hayes, all speaking at once, some from a second ago, some from years in the past. It was the sound of a life collapsing into a single, paradoxical moment. "Confirm. All hands. Maintain. The only timeline that matters. Secure the breach that isn't there. That's an order." It was a collage of commands, a ghost in the machine of her authority, still trying to run the ship. It raised a half-formed hand and pointed at the main engineering console. "The loop is terminal," a voice said from beside me. I turned. Mitchell was standing, his blank eyes fixed on the readings. The paradox drive created a stable temporal bubble, but the bubble's integrity is degrading. The loop is collapsing on itself. At the current rate of decay, reality will cease to be a meaningful concept in 12 minutes. We had 12 minutes before the ship, the bottle, and everything inside it simply dissolved into pure paradox. Peterson was pulling equipment from her medical kit, modifying her neural extraction device. "He's right," she said. "We can't survive in here. We have to get out of this timeline." "How?" I asked. "Mitchell," she commanded, turning to the engineer. "Protocols. An extinction-level event originating from a paradoxical source. What is the final contingency?" Mitchell's head tilted. A bird-like, unnatural motion. His eyes went unfocused for a second as he accessed a database that no longer had a user. "Project Lazarus," he said. "The universal exception. A theoretical weapon designed to resolve a reality-ending paradox by creating a larger, more fundamental one." "Explain," Peterson demanded. "The weapon retroactively prevents the initial cause of the paradox from ever occurring," Mitchell stated. "It forces a hard reset of the timeline to a point before the crisis began. It requires a trigger. The trigger event must be a perfect logical impossibility. An action with a statistical probability of absolute zero. An action with a 0% chance of happening." I knew what he was talking about. I was the only person on the ship who could even perceive a 0% chance, let alone attempt to act on it. "But the loop is collapsing," I said. "I can't get a clear read on any timeline. The probabilities are a storm." "I know," Peterson said, looking up from her work. "That's my part." She held up the modified neural extractor. It was no longer a tool for reading. It was covered in conduits and glowing capacitors. "This loop is a form of temporal pressure," she explained. "It's crushing us. I'm going to reverse the polarity. I'm not going to extract a memory. I'm going to extract the pressure itself. I'm going to pull the temporal decay of the next 12 minutes into myself." I stared at her, horrified. "Lisa, no. That will kill you." "It will do more than kill me," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "It will erase me so completely I won't have ever been born. But it will buy you a few seconds. A single, perfect, stable moment where the probabilities are clear. A moment where you can place your bet." She turned her back to me and faced the chaos of the bridge. "Get him to the core," she said to the two stunned security officers. "Get him in the chair." They grabbed my arms and began dragging me towards the sealed door of the probability core. I struggled, my eyes locked on Peterson. She was walking toward the center of the bridge, toward the void that had been her captain. "Lisa!" I shouted. She paused and looked back at me, just once. "You remember it all, Thomas," she said. "Remember it for me." Then she turned and activated the device. A silent scream of pure light erupted from the extractor. Peterson's body was silhouetted against an expanding sphere of temporal energy. The stuttering lights on the bridge steadied. The echoing voices fell silent. The shimmering decay of the bulkheads solidified. She was pulling all the chaos, all the paradoxes, all the unraveling time into herself. She was becoming a lightning rod for the apocalypse. The security officers shoved me through the door into the core and slammed it shut behind me. I scrambled into the navigation chair, lowering the crown onto my head. The world of probabilities opened up, and just as she'd promised, it was clear. The storm was gone. I saw every timeline, every branching path, with a perfect clarity, and they all ended in fire. In static, in void, every single one. There was no path to survival. Then a voice echoed in my head. It was the haze thing, speaking from the other side of the door, its paradoxical command imprinting itself on my mind. Navigate us to the timeline where we won. An impossible order, the ultimate zero probability event. I looked at the infinite threads of failure and I understood. Mitchell's weapon, Peterson's sacrifice, Hayes's final insane command. It wasn't a map. It was a recipe. I had to choose what couldn't be chosen. I let go of every gambling instinct I'd ever had, every urge to play the odds and find the winning hand. The only way to win was to fold the entire game. I focused my mind, my will, my entire consciousness. I looked past the trillions of failing timelines. I aimed my perception at the one thing that wasn't there, the single, impossible, non-existent outcome. A timeline where the wormhole drive failed on the launch pad, where the cartographer never left orbit, where humanity never poked a stick at the void and angered what lived within. A timeline where we lost the mission to save ourselves. I chose 0. I bet everything on the hand that was never dealt. I plunged my consciousness into the void of that choice. I felt the universe resist. It was an engine running on logic, and I had just fed it a command to divide by 0. Then, through the crown, I felt Mitchell's universal exception trigger, and everything went white. The air tasted of cheap whiskey. The felt on the poker table was worn slick and the chips in my hand were smooth. I wasn't seeing the future. I was just doing the math. The man across from me, a tourist in a loud shirt, had a 63% chance of bluffing. His left eye twitched every time he was holding a bad hand. It was twitching now. The dealer, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Maria, cleared her throat. "Bets to you, sir." I looked at my cards. A pair of 7s. Not a winning hand, not even a promising one. The pot was big, though, big enough to matter. The tourist had pushed all his chips to the center of the table, all in. I was about to fold. It was the smart play, the logical bet based on the odds. But as I reached for my cards, my thumb brushed against the top chip in my stack. It had a single 5-pointed star embossed on its surface. My hand froze over the table. The noise of the casino, the clatter of chips, the endless cheerful chiming of the slot machines, the low murmur of the crowd, faded away to a distant hum. A weight settled in my chest, a sudden crushing grief for something I couldn't name. It felt inherited. A phantom limb of a memory. Hayes. The name appeared in my mind. A sound without a face. Peterson. Mitchell. More names. Echoes in an empty room. I saw a flash of a woman with silver hair, a man with mismatched socks, a captain standing on the bridge of a ship that had never been built. I felt the burden of a debt for a game I'd never played. The loss was so profound, it felt like a hole had been torn through my soul, a void where an entire universe of experience was supposed to be. "Sir," the dealer's voice cut through the haze. "Call or fold?" I shook my head, the feeling receding. The casino noises rushed back in. The tourist was still staring at me, his eye twitching. The odds hadn't changed. It was still a bad bet, but something had changed inside me. The logic was the same, but the choice felt different. I thought of the name. Hayes. It felt like a command. The only timeline that matters is the one you can live with. I met the tourist's eyes. I pushed my entire stack of chips forward. The plastic clattered on the felt. "Call."